It's a very, very long time since we've been into Crow Wood together to have a look and see how the season is moving on, and it's actually a really long time since I've been here myself, so what better than to explore together on such a beautiful day as today. We've had a lot of rain. I know lots of people have had a lot of rain. I think I've actually got off very lightly compared to some of the flooded areas, but nonetheless it's rained and rained, and so a day like today, when the sun's suddenly shining and the sky is blue, what better than to come down into Crow Wood and see what's afoot. It's a very meandering path, which I think makes it seem extra magical, because you suddenly come out into shafts of sunlight like we are now, and then suddenly you go into shadow again and you get flickering of leaves. You imagine that probably the fair folk are just round the corner, wherever I'm headed. They're just ahead of me and flickering away before I can actually catch sight of them out of the corner of my eye. The birch leaves are changing colour now. I think it's a little bit late that they've started changing colour this year. Not just the birch leaves, but other leaves, not like the oak leaves, haven't really changed at all yet. And we're just heading now into a shady little spot between the oak trees and a big huge holly tree as well. I think if there's anywhere you're going to be aware of the presence of other beings apart from myself, it will be here. It's just got such a perfectly calm and yet in some ways quite lively atmosphere. It's really hard to put a finger on it, but I just feel that there are definitely other beings here who are keeping themselves a little bit hidden from my sight, just behind those tangled honeysuckle stems, or just crouching down behind the bracken at the moment and enjoying watching the first of the leaves spinning down. Something that contributes to that, I think, is that this wood has got quite a few holly trees in, and when it's sunny they reflect the light, and again there are reflections perhaps of other presences, and certainly it has that reflective sparkly quality. Just coming to a spot where the holly actually forms a tunnel I have to go through, so lots of sparkle and shine on a beautiful day like this. It's a very tangly wood as well, and of course that encourages a lot of cobweb building, and so there's lots of shimmer from, you probably can't see that on the camera, but there's lots and lots of shimmer from spider filaments, which is stretched between a lot of the twigs. Maybe you can see it a little bit. Can you see that glimmer? Which is a very fairy thing as well.
Sayer by Victor Tapner. The hearth is hushed, strange faces in firelight. Men rest against the wattle walls, ale-weary, their bellies heavy with feasting. To them who see no farther than their fields, the same trees leafing in spring, my head is full of treasure, my mouth rich with gemstones. I'm a sharpened axe on an enemy's neck, an arrow singing in sunlight, a sword's arc in the wooded night. I earn the first meat from the flesh hook, the best bed in the roundhouse. I trade with my tongue. A thatcher of stories, farmer of words. Homestead to homestead, I walk the sky's edge. An ear to the river's chatter, the kestrel's cry, the sighs of fenland trees, crippled in the wind.
Proper autumn has well and truly arrived here in Norfolk the last couple of days. I think we didn't have the huge storms that other people have experienced, with lots of damage or anything like that. We had some very, very heavy rain several times, and that's been more or less it. So there hasn't been any damage here. One evening, my little crabapple tree, which I'll show you in a moment, well, I've tied it up again now, leaned over at a rakish angle, but I've tied it now to a pipe on the wall, so that should be okay from now on. Anyway, I'll just take you round and have a look at how things are, but we haven't looked for a long time now, and I wanted to show you kind of how I deal with a garden like this, which was very, very full, a tiny garden, and how simple it is to look after should you wish to do something similar. So the first thing you'll see is that there are literally no flowers in the garden anymore, apart from the ice plant here, which is actually saying things haven't been damaged. That is actually looking a bit damaged and blown over. The weight of the flowers when they got heavy with the rain is clearly too much. They would hold a tremendous amount of water, those clusters of flower, and they bent right over. But I shall leave them because they are not going over the path, and at least there's a little bit of colour in the garden still. So the main thing that I have done, and I haven't done much at all, is just where there were some of the tall stems that I was leaving, like for example these here, the Veronicastrum, because they're lovely and sculptural in the winter once it's frosty and when there's nothing else much around. And these are the seed heads from the Japanese anemones you can see here. So where they're standing up nicely, like those were, I just showed you, I've let them be, and I will leave them all through the winter for those reasons. And they're also a good host plants for overwintering insects. And there are seeds on some of them, like I'll just show you some seeds. This fennel has still got some seeds, so that's good for the tiny birds in the winter. So yes, it's all very good reasons to leave things, but at the same time, where stems are leaned right across here where you walk, and it is a tiny space, I can't stress enough, it's only a few paces each direction, I have cut them back or cut them down so that you can walk around, and they're not really benefiting anything all leaned over. Another area where I think I will cut back is these, which are the Sanguisorba. You may remember from earlier in the summer, were full of beautiful little bobbly pinky purple flowers, absolutely gorgeous, but they're not now. And although they would make, again, they're good and sculptural if they're standing, they are leaned over here, they're broken stems, and see it's not getting in the way, but I still think I'll probably cut those down. This is my huge, although spindly, crabapple tree. Look how tall it is now. It is literally up to the eaves there where the sparrows like to congregate, and that's what, not surprisingly I suppose, because it is still quite young and thin, its roots loosened in the earth and it came down as an angle, but I've now tied it to that pipe you can see behind it. I think I said this last time, but it's still true, that this wayfaring tree, which I've got here near to the trellis, it keeps its leaves really beautifully. In fact, you can see here, if it will focus, there's new leaves coming there. It's really happy and healthy, and it's a really good choice because it's a native plant. It's as far as I know, the wayfaring tree. I think you do get them in the wild. It's a type of viburnum. But it's a species one, not a hybrid, and they do keep the leaves like that, so they're good for screening if you don't want to go down the full evergreen route and you like native plants. So I'm really pleased with that. I think it's really lovely, and I've got a couple in the back, but you don't really notice them so much because it's just a mass of other stuff. The little pond, you can see a lot more now, as you'd expect. Now I have. Not in the front here, but in the back on my back doorstep. Every night it's been very damp. Every night when I open my back door before I go to bed, just to look out and see what's happening, I always look to see if there's any visitors on the doorstep, because quite often there have been visitors on the doorstep, and I mean newts. I think I showed you newts last time. The other night there was a frog that hopped away. Now it was a medium-sized frog, but I still like to think that it came from one of the ponds, because I kind of feel I'm repeating myself a bit, but I said last time that there aren't any other ponds that I know of close by, so I feel that they are probably from here, even if I don't often, or I've only once actually seen the frog sitting on the rock there. But it is lovely to know that they're around, and that not just the frogs but all the other creatures in the night are there doing whatever they're going to be doing, whether or not I'm looking at them, basically. I really love that thought. I always live in hope that one day I'll see a hedgehog, but hedgehogs have become so rare, or at least in this part of the county or the country, or well, they're rare everywhere I think, but they seem extra rare here. I haven't seen one for years and years and years. I'm sure somebody who lives in Norfolk will say, oh, I have lots of hedgehogs, but anyway, I certainly haven't seen them around here, and I haven't even seen them sadly on the road or anything like that for years. So, which I know is quite good that they're not squashed, but they're not here to be squashed, which I think is sad in itself. So I think we've looked more or less right round all the things that are, we are just looking at the tail end of a season. And the promise of what's going to come, we're not really seeing that yet, because we haven't got the little spikes of tulips poking out yet, and we won't have until, I suppose, late winter time. Not quite sure when you first notice them coming up. It probably depends on the weather conditions that year. But at the moment it's just, it's looking like a very autumnal scene, which of course is a metaphor for what has to happen before the new growth can start. It's very apt for this time of year, sort of All Souls time of year. So I think we'll probably finish there, except of course we have to have a little hello to the garden guardian, who is looking really green at the moment. I don't know whether that's really showing up on the video, how green he is, but he's greener than I've seen him for a long, long time, probably because it has been damp, and the damp has stayed damp for a long time now, because it dries off and then it rains again heavily. And the frog looks extra green as well. He doesn't always look green, but I think he might have got an extra little layer of moss at the moment. When all the colour has gone from the flowers, it actually also makes you appreciate the foliage with colour like this. I don't know what it is actually, I put it in. It hasn't spread very fast, but it has spread a bit. It was a tiny little plant. I think it was just like one of these little rosettes, or maybe that's that amount when I bought it. And it spread just gently around the bottom of the willow arch. And it's just very nice to see those colours just leaping out a little bit when the day's a bit grey like it is today. There's a bit of brightness today, but it's overall it's got that autumnal feel about it. So that's the end of the tour. I thought I would just crouch down and just show you the colour of this ice plant flower, which I think is really gorgeous, but because it's all bent over now, you have to crouch down like this to really appreciate it and see the complexity of the little flowers as well. You can see why it would be so heavy, that it would get bowed down by the tremendous amount of moisture that's been precipitating recently. And that does remind me as well, just looking at the trunk of the hazel tree, to show you how tall the hazel has grown. There were 2 hazels in this little tiny front garden, but this one, just show you how tall the hedge is, and the hedge is a lot taller than me, and as you can see, the leaves of the hazel are just about the same height, which is really pleasing. There haven't been any nuts or anything yet. I don't know how many years it takes for nuts for them to start producing nuts, but it definitely is looking more established now. It's looking like a little tree rather than a little stick. There's a bit of chunkiness now to the trunk that wasn't there a year ago for certain. I think they've been in for about, I'm not very good with lengths of time, I don't know, 2 or 3 years perhaps at the most. So let's go out and shut the garden gate and perhaps go in and have a nice cup of coffee.